Welcome to From Manuscript to Ministry, created and produced by Elder William Moore, the podcast where faith meets the written word. Each week, your hosts David and Martha dive into powerful, self-published books by Christian authors who are boldly using their God-given voices to impact the kingdom. Whether you're an aspiring writer, a reader seeking spiritual growth, or a ministry leader in search of authentic resources, this is your space to be inspired, encouraged, and equipped. Let's explore today's featured book and uncover the life-changing message behind the manuscript.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're shifting gears a little bit. We're focusing on something very specific, but also, I think, universally applicable. We're diving into a concept from a devotional guide, which is not our usual source material. It's titled The Voice for the Voiceless, a Proverbs 31 Mandate.
Right. And usually we're neck deep in economics reports or historical documents. This is different. This is really an ethical framework.
It really is. It feels like a call to action.
It is.
Yeah.
The whole thing is built around one single statement, quote, #16, which the source presents as, well, basically a life's mission. It says, she is the voice for the voiceless, advocating for justice and equality with unwavering determination.
That one sentence has so much in it. Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is, I think, pretty clear. And it's crucial for anyone listening who wants to make a real impact.
Yeah.
First, we have to break down what exactly this material means by advocacy. And then, maybe more importantly, how do we take that powerful, almost ancient idea and actually apply it, like in our lives today?
We have to move past just the theory. The source insists on tangible action.
It does. And it's important to note, right from the top, the source doesn't just call this a quote. It calls it a calling.
And that word choice is everything. A calling implies an obligation. It's not just a nice thought or something you can aspire to. It's presented as, a non-negotiable if you want to live a life of integrity.
That really sets the stakes high from the get-go. If it's a calling, you can't just ignore it. But a calling to respond to what exactly?
Well, that's where the material lays out the core problem. It frames the world as a place where, frankly, injustice often wins simply because it goes unnoticed.
Or because people are actively silenced.
Exactly. Marginalized voices are pushed to the side either by big systems or just by simple, everyday neglect. And the framework here suggests that if you see that, if you notice the silence, your own silence is no longer neutral. It's complicity.
Wow. Okay, so that just erases any comfortable middle ground. It basically says if you see it, you own a piece of it.
You own the response, yeah. And that's a huge shift in responsibility. It moves advocacy from something that, professionals do, lawyers, lobbyists, to a basic function of having moral sight.
Yeah.
If you can see and you can speak, you have a platform.
Let's dig into that then. Section 1, the heart behind this mandate. Because the source immediately makes a really important distinction here. It says, this is about advocacy that comes from compassion and something it calls holy conviction. And it makes it clear that's very different from just, activism.
That distinction is, I think, the foundation for everything else in the text. When we think of activism, we often think about the methods, right? The protests, the volume, the visibility.
Sure.
But this definition of advocacy shifts the focus entirely to the motive. It's rooted in compassion, which means the driving force is the well-being of the other person, the one who is voiceless. It's completely outward focused.
And that phrase, holy conviction, that's a heavy one. It sounds like something much deeper than just being passionate about an issue for a little while.
It is. It grounds the action in something that isn't going to fade when the news cycle moves on. A holy conviction, as it's defined here, is a core moral belief that justice is an absolute. It's not optional. It supersedes your own comfort, your own convenience.
So if your advocacy is based on that conviction, it can last.
It's sustainable. If it's just based on emotion, you burn out. That conviction is what fuels the unwavering determination part of the quote.
That makes perfect sense. But I have to ask, if it's explicitly grounded in holy conviction, does that make it inaccessible for someone who doesn't share that specific faith background?
That's a great question, and the text sort of anticipates it. It handles it by focusing on the outcome, which is universal, human dignity. The motives might be faith-based for the devotional's audience, but the goal, justice and equality, is something anyone can get behind. The conviction just acts as the engine to make sure you don't give up.
Okay, so let's break down those 3 pillars from the quote itself. You have a voice for the voiceless, then justice and equality, and finally, unwavering determination.
I see them as the who, the what, and the how. Voice for the voiceless is the who. It defines who you're speaking for. People who are silenced by their condition, their status, by the system itself. Your job is to fill that vacuum.
And then what is this huge goal? Justice and equality. I mean, that's not about small fixes. That's about systemic fairness.
Exactly. It's about making sure rights and opportunities are given out without prejudice. And the how, that unwavering determination, that's the long-haul part. Justice work is slow. It's frustrating. This is about resilience. It's about being willing to stand firm even when it's unpopular or uncomfortable.
This brings us to that fascinating part of the analysis, the whole volume versus purpose idea. The source is very clear that this advocate isn't just loud for the sake of volume.
No, she's loud with purpose.
What's the difference, really?
It's a shift from performance to principle. The source argues that volume is often about ego. It's about wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, getting credit. But purpose, especially purpose driven by empathy, means your volume is only dialed up to match the level of the injustice.
So you're not trying to get the spotlight on yourself.
No, you're trying to shine a light on someone else who's been overlooked. It's a totally selfless way of thinking about influence.
And to make sure this isn't just an abstract idea, the source gets really practical. It defines 4 specific arenas where this has to be applied.
Yes, the 4 rooms. This is where it gets very real because it takes the idea out of society in general and puts it right into our daily lives.
The classroom, the courtroom, the boardroom, and the living room, that's everywhere. It really dismantles the idea that advocacy is just for, marches and rallies.
Let's walk through them because they cover the whole spectrum. The courtroom is the most obvious one. It's the official home of justice.
So this is about legal rights, challenging unfair laws.
Right. It's the formal defense of the law itself, making sure it protects everyone. Then you have the boardroom.
This is all about economic justice.
All about it. This is where decisions about hiring, pay equity, and corporate responsibility happen. Advocacy here means someone inside has to be brave enough to question the bottom line when it starts to hurt people.
That takes a lot of courage.
A ton. Then there's the classroom. This is about the next generation. It's about making sure every single student gets a fair shot.
So that could be fighting for a kid with special needs or challenging a curriculum that's biased.
Exactly. It's being the moral voice in that educational system. But then there's the last one, the living room. And I think this is the toughest one.
Because it's so personal. This is about our families, our friends.
It's the ultimate test of your conviction. Can you challenge a racist comment at Thanksgiving dinner? Can you defend a family member who's being quietly excluded or gossiped about? The social cost is immediate. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable.
And that's the big takeaway from this section, isn't it? You don't need a stage to make a stand. Sometimes the biggest stands are the quietest ones when no one else is even watching.
Exactly. By laying out these 4 rooms, the source makes it impossible to escape. It's basically saying you are already in an arena of influence. The only question is, are you using it?
Okay, so with all this talk of holy conviction in Proverbs 31, it's pretty clear this isn't just a modern self-help idea. It's being presented as something much older, much deeper.
Oh, absolutely. The material immediately pivots to its biblical foundation because, really, quote, #16 only has its full weight when you see it as an interpretation of a specific text.
Proverbs 31 verses 8 and 9.
That's the bedrock. That's what gives the unwavering determination its power.
Let's read it because the source says you have to really understand the text. Proverbs 31.8 to 9 from the NIV. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute.
Just breaking that down, the command is absolute. Speak up. There's no fine print. There are no exceptions for when it's scary or inconvenient. It's a duty.
And it's for 2 groups. First, those who cannot speak for themselves. That could be, well, so many things. A disability, poverty, being part of an oppressed group.
Right. In those cases, the advocate is an intermediary. They have to understand the need and then translate it into the language of power. But that second group, all who are destitute, that's an even heavier term than just poor.
What's the weight behind that word, destitute?
In the original Hebrew, the word implies someone who has been completely stripped, not just of money, but of protection, of resources, of dignity. They are the utterly helpless. They've lost their standing in the community. So when the scripture says to speak for them, it's not talking about charity.
It's talking about justice.
It's demanding restitution, the restoration of their rights, of their dignity. That's where, quote, #16 gets its fire, from the idea of defending the destitute.
So the source is connecting this modern mandate directly to an ancient, urgent command to restore justice for the most vulnerable people in society.
Precisely. It's not just about doing a nice thing. It's about fixing what's been broken by injustice. And to show how this works in practice, the source gives us these historical case studies, these biblical figures who did this exact work.
Often at huge personal risk.
At immense personal risk. Let's start with Esther. Her story is the perfect example of using your position and influence even when it costs you everything.
She had it all right. She was the queen, living in comfort. But her people were about to be annihilated.
And her relative, Mordecai, says that famous line to her that maybe she came to her position for such a time as this. The material really focuses on the risks she took. She had to go to the king without being summoned.
Which was a potential death sentence.
Absolutely. This wasn't a calculated PR move. This was putting her life on the line. Her advocacy was a quiet, private, high-stakes political act.
And that really shows the unwavering determination part. She spent her influence to save her people instead of hoarding it to protect herself. Influence is a resource you're supposed to spend on justice.
And you can contrast her with Deborah. Esther worked behind the scenes. Deborah was out in the open. She was a judge, a public figure with real institutional power.
So her advocacy was more structural. She was the system, in a way.
Right. She used her position to make sure the law was applied fairly, to settle disputes, even to lead armies to fight oppression. She shows that advocacy can be about wielding power ethically from the inside, not just challenging it from the outside.
So you have these two models, Esther, the relational advocate who risks her personal safety, and Deborah, the positional advocate who uses her formal authority.
Both driven by the exact same mandate. But then the source points to the ultimate example, Jesus. The analysis there focuses on how he consistently advocated for the people who were completely shut out of society.
And the text is really specific about the groups he helped. Lepers, widows, children, and Samaritans. What's so significant about that list?
Every single one of those groups was voiceless.
Ah.
Lepers were literally exiled. Widows had no economic or legal standing. Children had no voice at all. And Samaritans were despised, seen as ethnic and religious outsiders.
So his advocacy wasn't just about speaking for them, it was about his actions.
Exactly. He didn't just talk about the voiceless. He touched the leper, he praised the widow, he welcomed the children, he talked to the Samaritan woman. He actively broke down the social walls that made them voiceless in the first place.
So the source presents advocacy as not just speaking for someone, but restoring their own ability to speak for themselves by giving them back their dignity.
That's the overarching theme. The true advocate refuses to stay silent when the world tells them to, and they use whatever influence they have to defend the helpless. And that's the bridge to the next section. How do we do that now without the thrones and the palaces?
Right, that is the big pivot. How do we take this ancient blueprint and apply it to our own lives? The source insists that we have to.
And it does that by giving these incredibly specific modern examples. It calls it real-life ministry application, but really, it's for everyone.
What I love about these is how normal they are. They show that you don't have to be famous to be an advocate. You just have to be close to an injustice.
Let's start with the first one. The teacher speaking up for underrepresented students.
A teacher sees the system up close every single day. What does advocacy look like for them?
It could be fighting for fair resources, making sure the kids who need extra help actually get it. It could be challenging a disciplinary policy that you notice is targeting one group of students more than another.
So you might have to push back against your own principal or the school board.
You might. It requires real courage. Then there's the next example. The mom, advocating for a child with learning differences. The source presents this as a perfect example of unwavering determination.
This starts in the living room, but it doesn't stay there. It moves into the classroom, into the administration office.
Absolutely. A parent in that situation has to become an expert. They have to learn the laws, the medical terms. They have to fight against systems that are designed to be one size fits all. It's this relentless protective fight to make sure their child is seen and supported.
Then we have a huge shift to the business leader pushing for equity in hiring. Now we're back in the boardroom.
And here, the advocacy has real financial and structural power. A business leader can actually change the policies that create barriers.
So, asking tough questions. Who are we hiring? Who are we promoting? Are we paying people fairly?
Yes. Maybe they implement blind resume reviews to get rid of unconscious bias, or they demand diverse interview panels. It's about using their position to create economic justice, which is a core part of that original quote.
And again, that's not always easy. It can challenge the way things have always been done.
And finally, there's the community member believer who challenges injustice locally. This is the one that's open to literally everyone.
This is street-level stuff. What does that look like?
It's about just opening your eyes to what's happening in your own town. Maybe you advocate for better lighting in an underserved neighborhood, or you go to a town hall meeting to challenge a zoning law that's going to push people out. It's about noticing who's being overlooked right where you live.
All these examples just hammer home that idea that your life, right now, is your platform.
Which leads to this really profound idea in the source material, the weight of a single voice. It directly tackles that feeling of being powerless.
Yeah, that feeling of, what can I do? I'm just one person.
The source counters that by saying your single voice carries kingdom weight.
What does that even mean, kingdom weight?
It's this idea that if you are the only person in a room who sees an injustice, or the only one who is safe enough to speak up about it, then in that one moment, your voice is the only tool for justice that exists. The weight of your voice isn't about how many followers you have, it's about the necessity of that single moment.
So in that moment, you're not just one person, you're everything.
You're the hinge point.
Right.
And the core takeaway is so clear. Don't underestimate your platform. The goal is not to be known. It's not about fame. The goal is being bold for the sake of someone who can't speak up for themselves.
So the whole motivation flips again. It's not about your ego, it's about empathy. And being bold means you have to be willing to accept the cost.
That's it. You have to be willing to lose a little comfort, a little social standing for someone else's benefit.
And that idea of boldness and sacrifice brings us to the final part of the source material, which is about the scope of our action. It's not all big public stands.
No. And this distinction between public versus private advocacy is what makes the mandate something you can live out every single day. The source says, yes, sometimes you have to confront systems publicly, but it gives so much attention to the power of a quiet, private act of justice.
It gives these really simple, almost shockingly small examples. It says, being a voice can be a text, a prayer, a quiet act of justice.
Let's unpack those because
Yeah.
they're so practical. A text, that's so modern. It could be a private message to your boss pointing out that someone else's idea was overlooked in a meeting.
Or just a message to a friend who's struggling to say, I see you, you're not alone.
Exactly. Or defending someone in a group chat when they're not there. It's a small, fast, digital intervention. Then a prayer. That's about mobilizing spiritual force for someone. It's the inner work that fuels the outer work. It's an act of faith when you feel helpless.
And a quiet act of justice. That feels like it could be anything.
It's all the moments when you restore fairness without anyone knowing. It's quietly making sure a junior colleague gets credit for their work. It's slipping some money to a neighbor who's struggling without needing a thank you. It's justice for the sake of justice, nothing more.
This completely democratizes advocacy. It means you can fulfill this huge mandate without ever being in the spotlight.
And since the goal of the source is always action, it then immediately forces you to reflect. It asks these two incredibly direct questions.
They're very personal. The first one is, who in your world needs a voice today?
And that forces you to look around your immediate circle, your family, your office, your neighborhood. It's not about some abstract problem halfway around the world. It's about who, right here, right now, is vulnerable.
And the second question is even tougher. Where have you been silent? Where you are being called to speak?
Oof. Yeah, that one assumes you already know. It assumes you've felt that nudge, that prompting to speak up, and you've ignored it. And it forces you to ask yourself why. Was it fear? Was it just wanting to avoid awkwardness? It demands just radical self-honesty.
And then it gives you a plan. It doesn't just leave you with the guilt. It says, write it down, pray it through, and take action.
It's a three-step strategy. Identify the person or situation. Reconnect with your conviction, your why, and then go be gold. And the weekly challenge it gives is so simple. Stand in the gap for one person.
Stand in the gap. That's such a powerful image. It's like putting yourself in the line of fire for someone else.
It's taking the hit, absorbing the discomfort so that someone who is vulnerable doesn't have to. It turns you from a bystander into an intercessor.
And finally, the source brings it all back home. It reminds you that this quote is part of a bigger collection and that each quote is supposed to be a divine mirror.
Yeah, a mirror to show you who you are becoming. So this whole deep dive really is about holding up that mirror.
And asking, what do I see? Do I see an advocate who is determined? Or do I see silence and someone who is choosing comfort over calling?
That's the question.
Okay, that brings us to the end of a really intense and, I think, challenging deep dive. Let's just quickly summarize the biggest takeaways.
I think first and foremost, we learned that true advocacy, according to this source, is all about empathetic purpose. It's driven by a deep conviction, not a fleeting emotion.
And it's grounded in that ancient scriptural command from Proverbs 31 to speak up for the destitute, for those who literally cannot speak for themselves.
And we saw how that applies everywhere, in the courtroom, the boardroom, the classroom, and yes, even the living room. It can be a huge public action or a tiny private one.
And maybe the most important part, that you have to reject that feeling that you're powerless, that your single voice has, as the source says, kingdom weight when you use it for justice. The goal isn't to be known, it's to be bold. So as we wrap this up, the source ends with this encouragement to speak truth, carry grace, and be the voice. And building on that, I want to leave everyone with one last thought that really brings it all back to that tension between our comfort and our calling.
If we accept that advocacy means defending the helpless, even when it costs us something, like it cost Esther, who literally risked her life, then the question for all of us is this: what is the smallest, most comfortable step of advocacy that you are actively avoiding right now? What is that one difficult conversation, that one quiet correction, that one inconvenient choice you're putting off? And what is the real price being paid by someone who is voiceless right now for your avoidance? That's the question the mandate demands we wrestle with this week.
Think about that, Bryce. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today on From Manuscript to Ministry. If today's featured book encouraged, challenged, or inspired you, we invite you to take the next step, purchase a copy, and support the author behind the message. When you invest in their work, you're not just buying a book, you're sowing into good ground and helping advance the kingdom of God through faith-filled storytelling. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs it. Your support helps these powerful voices reach even further. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, keep praying, and keep walking boldly in your calling. God is still turning manuscripts into ministries.